The Butterfly Effect by Nikayla Sarai. Chapter 23. Decisions, Decisions, Decisions. Roman had never wanted an office job. Stuck in a windowless cubicle, sitting at a desk, staring at a computer screen, he could feel his creative brain cells shriveling at the mere thought. He quietly exhaled, tugging at the red kerchief he'd tied around his neck to hide the scar, taking the opportunity to feel the metal of the crown necklace hidden underneath. It was probably morbid, in a way, to wear the thing that took away his voice, but at the same time, happy thoughts. Roman couldn't imagine not wearing it. He'd always worn his crown whenever possible before. He wasn't going to let a little accident stop him from doing so now. Adjusting the sleeves of his white dress shirt, pushing them up past his elbows, Roman took a breath, brushing the pocket watch hidden under his shirt as he looked up at the skyscraper emblazoned with the Specs logo. Thankfully, he wasn't completely clueless to what he was getting into. The memories of the last 6 months, since he'd been in a coma for the other half of the year, had drifted into his mind with the grace of a sledgehammer as he'd stayed up too late trying to find out what had happened to Virgil. They told him about his struggles with physical therapy, about learning sign language to communicate, and more recently how he, Patton, and Logan had been working to create a more vocal language of clicks, whistles, and pops that Roman could make with his tongue and lips to communicate. He knew Patton had transferred his residency to the city so he could be closer to Roman, and that his best friend was constantly calling and dropping by to ensure he was doing okay and following his strict recovery program to the letter. Occasionally, Pat would even bring him new creams to try and help the scars on his body fade. Roman grimaced, lifting a hand to feel the new half-moon scar by his left eye. So many scars. The memories had told him hundreds of things last night, except what happened to Virgil. He hadn't seen the scriptwriter since the bridge, since his bungled rescue attempt. The guy was practically a ghost. Hours of scouring the internet had yielded him a Facebook page that hadn't been updated in years, a MySpace account similarly void of recent activity, and a handful of articles about the accident on the bridge. He knew Virgil had survived the fall, having been taken to the same hospital that Roman had spent 6 months lying in a coma in. But after that, nothing. No word on how his own recovery went. No word on where he'd disappeared to. No word on if he was still alive. Would Thomas know the answer? Would he even allow Roman to ask him? You know, for just coming to check out the place, I didn't expect you to appear so nervous, Ro. Logan called out to him as he stepped out of the building, 2 styrofoam cups in hand. Dressed in a black shirt and blue tie, he looked just like any other worker coming in and out of the building. No one would suspect that the nerd in glasses was actually the CEO of the place. Roman huffed, blowing the hair out of his eyes. "I'm not nervous," he signed, lifting his chin. "I was admiring the building." Logan quirked an eyebrow. "Sure you were," he said, handing him one of the cups. "I've conducted enough interviews to know a nervous person when I see one, and Roman, you're definitely nervous." Roman clicked his tongue in irritation, feeling the cold sides of the drink. "Shut up." Logan sighed. "I'm not expecting you to say yes right now, Ro. It's a job offer, that's all. If you don't think it will work out here, you can refuse." He knew that. Knew Logan was just trying to help him get back on his feet now that he was recovered enough to try and find work. But it didn't bring him any comfort. This was an office job, pure and simple. In any case, Logan tilted his head to the cup. "It's frozen hot chocolate, to satisfy your new sweet tooth and keep steam from coming out of Dr. Patton's ears if he thought I was offering you something hot." "Right. We can't have that." Angry Patton was not a sight he wanted to deal with today, especially when it came to drinks. He wasn't allowed hot things because his throat was still healing. Wasn't allowed hard things for fear of tearing the lining. God, What he wouldn't give to chow down on a bag of ranch Doritos right now. He'd been limited to soft and cold foods for far too long because his doctors were worried about how his throat would hold up. Roman lifted the cup to his lips, taking a sip, and popped his lips in surprise. How? It tasted just like hot chocolate, but frozen. How? What wizardry was this? Lo shrugged. I don't know, but I had hoped it would satisfy, he said, adjusting his glasses, giving Roman a small smile. He took another sip before grinning, saluting Logan like Remy would have. Perfect, he clicked. He hadn't met Remy in this timeline. The coma had kind of made that impossible. Good, Logan smiled, gesturing to the skyscraper. So, ready for the tour? No, but he'd said he'd come look. Roman nodded. Lead the way, boss, he said, following after Specs as he led them inside to a jungle. It was like walking into the middle of a freaking jungle. Roman stopped dead, mouth dropping open, staring at the various flowers, vines, bushes, and even large trees growing in the wide-open room. He hadn't even considered that the large windows outside meant that the ground floor was more open than typical office spaces. It could hardly be considered typical at all when the first floor extended up at least 6 stories in its own mini biosphere. Logan chuckled. I told you it wasn't your regular office, Roman. We are trying to save the planet, after all. Roman blinked, hands stuttering in their movements as he craned his head to see through the forest. Yes, but flowers, trees, inside... How? He'd expected desks, ringing phones, possibly labs every now and then with scientists in their oversized goggles doing experiments. But having an actual mini rainforest inside a building? He whirled, glaring at Logan. You! I thought Labs, he fingerspelled. Experiments. Mad scientist, not world in a building. And that's why I offered you a place here, Ro, he said, his eyes sparkling as he pulled Roman deeper into the building, walking along the clearly marked paths while people strolled by, some in dress shirts and pants, others wearing actual lab coats or in overalls and covered in dirt. It's not your typical sit-down job. If you give this place a chance, I think you could find something that would suit you here. Roman had expected to walk in and walk back out an hour later, washing his hands of the whole office gig once and for all, content that he'd satisfied Logan's pleas to come check it out. But no. Each and every room Specs led him to on the tour held a new surprise, a new adventure. No 2 floors were exactly the same, devoted to different areas of research and experimentation that wasn't only focused on energy conservation or restoring the planet. Lo had devoted 6 floors to medicinal studies, potential cures, and new medicinal procedures that were less invasive with better equipment to help patent out in this timeline. He'd created another 2 floors for testing new, environmentally safe building materials, some artificially created, others using organic sources. Logan even had an entire floor devoted to underwater exploration, acting more like a command center for a virtual army of underwater robots and mini-submarines. It was all more captivating than Roman wanted to admit. He couldn't see how he could contribute to it, though. His major had been in theater, not science-y stuff. He chewed his bottom lip, his mind racing with potential ideas as he followed Logan back outside hours later, the day having passed by in a blur. Maybe he could help out with the building materials? He'd helped build sets for plays back in the day after taking a couple carpentry and metalworking classes. If he brushed off those rusty skills, maybe he could... It's a lot to take in, I know, Logan said, interrupting his inner musings as he flagged down a taxi for Roman to take home. Roman nodded, quietly grateful that he wouldn't have to take the bus back. The day he received the all-clear to ride his motorcycle again couldn't come soon enough. Understatement. Just think on it, okay? Working here, for me. Logan rubbed the back of his neck. For as long as you want or need. Funny. He'd said almost the exact same thing to Logan when he'd been an ex-convict huddled on a street corner. He'd given him a chance. A job. Roman nodded, clapping Logan on the shoulder. I'll let you know, he promised, giving Lo his most winning smile as he slipped into the back of the cab. Soon. He gave a jaunty wave through the glass, his smile fading into a thoughtful frown as the taxi took off, dropping him off at his small apartment 20 minutes later for another P.B. & Crofter's dinner. He exhaled, mind whirling as he stepped out onto the balcony, careful not to look over the edge. Falling. He shook his head, resolutely looking out to the river a stone's throw away. It wasn't just this potential job he had to think about. Roman brushed the broken crown hidden under the kerchief, before grabbing the chain around his neck, fishing the golden pocket watch from out of his shirt. He held it in the palm of his hand, tracing the design with his thumb. It was the warp. It had been weighing in the back of his mind the entire day. His final choice. He could choose to keep this life, live as a mute, unknown, unable to have the acting career he'd always dreamed of. Working instead for Logan's environmentally Willy Wonka-esque company for the foreseeable future. Or he could choose to reject his three choices. Return to his fame and fortune. Return to being a big star on Broadway. Return to his trip to London for filming his first major role in a movie. Return to being able to speak, laugh, and sing again. Roman narrowed his eyes as he slipped the chain from around his neck. Return to a life with a homebody Patton, blind and in a wheelchair. To a temperamental Logan, an ex-con with a large logic tattoo on his forehead, barely getting his life back together. And to a life with Virgil dead from committing suicide before he could see his script become famous. Roman shook his head, lifting his eyes to the river, watching yachts idly moving up and down it. His hand tightened on the watch. Or he could choose to keep this life, with Patton on his way to becoming a successful pediatric surgeon, helping children recover from their illnesses, with Logan and his company improving the world with each new discovery and invention, with Virgil hopefully still alive, hopefully well on his way to achieving the fame and fortune he deserved. His lips twitched. When it came down to it, there really wasn't that hard of a choice. In one smooth movement, Roman pulled his arm back. So long, old life. He thrust his arm forward, only for a rainbow hand to grab his wrist, stopping him from throwing the watch into the river.